The midnight blaze Valerie Foster set her violin case down with a sigh of relief. After 3 hours of practice, her fingers ached pleasantly, a familiar sensation that reminded her she was getting back on track. The small apartment in Westwood's historic Bellamy building wasn't anything like her previous loft in Philadelphia, but it represented something more important, a second chance. 6 months ago, stage fright had paralyzed her during a crucial audition with the Philadelphia Symphony. The humiliation had been total, her confidence shattered. Moving to this quiet college town to teach music and rebuild her career seemed the only way forward. Tonight's practice session had been particularly productive. Maybe she was finally turning a corner. Outside, late September rain lashed against the century-old windows. Thunder rumbled, and Valerie jumped as the lights flickered momentarily. The Bellamy's superintendent had mentioned something about electrical updates scheduled for next month. Nothing to worry about, he'd assured her. After a simple dinner, Valerie drifted to sleep with the sound of rain as her lullaby. She didn't know how much time had passed when a strange crackling noise pulled her from dreams. The air felt unusually warm, and something acrid tickled her nose. Smoke. Fully awake now, Valerie leapt from bed. Orange light flickered beneath her door, and when she touched the handle, it radiated heat. Heart pounding, she grabbed her phone and backed away, dialing emergency services with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? There's a fire in my building, the Bellamy on Oakwood Street. I'm trapped in apartment 4C. Her voice cracked as smoke began seeping through the doorframe. Stay on the line, ma'am. Fire department is being dispatched. Can you get to a window? Valerie stumbled toward her bedroom window, coughing as smoke filled the apartment. Outside, the storm continued to rage, complicating everything. Through sheets of rain, she could see flames licking up the side of the building 2 windows down. I can see the fire from here. It's spreading fast. Can you safely exit through the window? Is there a fire escape? Valerie tried to push up the old sash window, but decades of paint had sealed it shut. The window won't open. Panic edged into her voice as she scanned the room for something to break the glass. Fire department is 3 minutes out. Try to seal the door with wet towels and stay low. Following instructions, Valerie stuffed soaked towels against the door, but smoke continued to pour in. The building's old wood was feeding the flames like kindling. As she crawled back to the window, a terrible crack echoed through the apartment, part of the ceiling collapsing in the hallway. She was truly trapped now. Through the window, red lights appeared cutting through the rain. Fire trucks. Help. Valerie frantically waved her phone's flashlight, hoping to be seen. The apartment grew hotter by the second. Smoke burned her lungs despite staying low. Most terrifying was the sound, the hungry roar of flames consuming everything in their path. Her gaze fell on her violin case in the corner. Inside was a 200-year-old instrument, her most precious possession, her grandmother's legacy. But there was no time, no way to save it. As darkness crowded the edges of her vision, Valerie pressed against the window, watching firefighters deploy below. Would they reach her in time? The building groaned ominously, timbers stressed beyond endurance, her last coherent thought before consciousness began to slip. After everything she'd survived, everything she'd rebuilt, this couldn't be how her story ended. But the flames surrounding her told a different story. Through smoke and shadows, Donovan adjusted his oxygen mask as Westwood Fire Department's Engine 7 pulled up to the Bellamy. Rain hammered against his helmet while lightning illuminated the historic building, now partially consumed by angry orange flames. After 8 years as a firefighter, Marcus had developed an instinct for dangerous blazes, and this one set off every alarm bell in his mind. 3rd and 4th floors fully involved. East side, Captain Rivera shouted over the storm. Structure dates to 1912. Expect rapid spread and potential collapse. Marcus nodded grimly. Old buildings like this were death traps during fires. Lathe and plaster walls creating hidden pathways for flames. Timber frames that burned like matchsticks. Donovan, Phillips, search and rescue, west stairwell. We've got reports of at least 1 resident trapped on 4. Copy that, Marcus replied, exchanging a determined glance with his partner. As they approached the building, a flash of light caught his eye, someone waving a phone from a fourth-floor window. Cap! Visual confirmation, fourth floor, northwest corner. Inside, heat pressed against them like a physical force. The stairwell was still navigable, but smoke billowed down in thick clouds. By the third floor, visibility dropped to nearly zero despite their flashlights. Stay close, Marcus called to Phillips as they reached the fourth-floor landing. The hallway groaned ominously, flames visible through cracks in the ceiling. They wouldn't have much time. Fire department! Call out! Marcus shouted, listening intently between the roar of flames. Nothing. They moved methodically down the hall, checking each apartment. When they reached 4C, the door was hot to the touch even through Marcus's gloves. Stand back, he ordered, swinging his Halligan tool against the lock. The door splintered open on the third strike, releasing a surge of black smoke. Marcus dropped to his knees, crawling into the apartment. Fire department! Anyone here? A faint cough from the far room answered him. Phillips, I've got a victim. Clear the exit route. Marcus navigated through smoke-filled darkness toward the sound. In the bedroom, he found a woman collapsed near the window, barely conscious. I've got you, he reassured, his voice muffled through his mask. Can you walk? The woman, Valerie, according to the information dispatch had provided, tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped her into his arms. My violin, she whispered hoarsely, gesturing weakly toward a case in the corner. Marcus hesitated only a second before grabbing the case with his free hand. The building shuddered around them, a warning of imminent collapse. Phillips, what's our status? He called into his radio as he carried Valerie toward the door. Static then. Primary exit compromised. East stairwell fully involved. Marcus's mind raced through their options, each worse than the last. The hallway ceiling had partially collapsed, blocking their return path. The west stairwell was their only chance now. Hang on, he told Valerie, who nodded weakly against his shoulder. They moved through the burning hallway, flames licking at them from all sides. The heat was becoming unbearable even through his protective gear. At the stairwell door, Marcus found Phillips fighting to keep it clear. Structure's going, Phillips shouted. We've got minutes, maybe less. Marcus passed the violin case to Phillips. Take this. I've got her. They descended through increasingly treacherous conditions. Between the second and first floors, a thunderous crash above signaled a major collapse. The stairwell filled with debris and burning embers. Go, go, go! Marcus urged as they navigated the final flight. Outside, paramedics rushed forward as they emerged from the inferno. Marcus gently transferred Valerie to a waiting gurney, removing his mask as rain cooled his overheated skin. You're safe now, he told her as oxygen was placed over her face. Her eyes, though reddened from smoke, fixed on his with surprising clarity. Thank you, she mouthed, fingers weakly reaching toward him before medical personnel whisked her away. Behind them, with a sound like thunder, the eastern portion of the Bellamy collapsed entirely. Marcus watched, knowing how close they'd come to being caught in it. This wasn't the first life he'd saved, but something about the woman's eyes stayed with him as he returned to the endless work of containing the blaze. Hours later, when the fire was finally extinguished, Marcus found himself still thinking about the woman he'd carried from the flames. Healing flames. 3 days after the fire, Valerie sat upright in her hospital bed, gazing out the window at Westwood's autumn foliage. The doctor had just delivered good news. Despite smoke inhalation and minor burns on her hands, she would make a full recovery. Physically, at least. Mentally was another story. Each time she closed her eyes, she relived those terrifying moments. The heat, the smoke, the certainty she wouldn't survive. Sleep brought nightmares of being trapped in endless burning corridors. A light knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened to reveal a tall man with dark hair and observant hazel eyes. Though she'd only glimpsed him briefly during the rescue, she recognized him immediately. Miss Foster, I'm Marcus Donovan, from Westwood Fire. I wanted to check how you're doing. Valerie straightened, suddenly self-conscious of her hospital gown and unwashed hair. You're the one who carried me out. He nodded, stepping into the room with an easy grace that belied his powerful frame. In one hand, he carried a familiar case. "My violin!" Valerie exclaimed, eyes widening. "I thought it was gone." Marcus placed the case on her bed. "You asked for it even while half-conscious. Seemed important." Valerie ran her fingers over the worn leather, emotion tightening her throat. "It was my grandmother's. She taught me to play. It's irreplaceable." "Then I'm glad we got it out." He smiled, pulling up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Grateful to be alive," she replied honestly. "Thanks to you," Marcus shook his head. "Just doing my job." "Well, your just a job saved my life and my most precious possession. I'd say that earns you more than standard gratitude." They fell into surprisingly easy conversation. Marcus told her about his 8 years with the fire department, how he'd been drawn to the profession after his family had lost their home to a fire when he was 14. Valerie shared her story: the failed audition in Philadelphia, the move to Westwood for a fresh start, her position teaching music at the local college. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked eventually. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" The question brought reality crashing back. Valerie had lost everything except her violin, clothes, books, her modest savings kept in a fireproof box that had proven decidedly not fireproof. "The university arranged temporary housing," she explained. "But starting over, it's overwhelming." "The community's organizing support for everyone affected by the fire," Marcus offered. "I can put you in touch with the coordinator." When he left an hour later, Valerie felt lighter than she had since the fire. There was something solid about Marcus Donovan, a steadiness she found herself drawn to. Over the following weeks, as Valerie rebuilt her life piece by piece, Marcus became a constant presence. He helped her navigate insurance claims, accompanied her to community donation centers, and introduced her to resources she wouldn't have found on her own. Their friendship deepened through shared cups of coffee and long conversations. Valerie learned about Marcus's close-knit family, his passion for woodworking, and his quiet dedication to his community. He discovered her dry sense of humor, her love of classical composers, and her determination to overcome the anxiety that had derailed her career. One evening, as they walked through Palmer Park after dinner, Valerie stopped suddenly. "I have something to show you," she said, opening her violin case. The restoration specialist had finally pronounced it undamaged by the fire. In the fading autumn light, Valerie played for the first time since the night of the fire, a simple, haunting melody that spoke of loss and hope intertwined. As the last note faded, she looked up to find Marcus watching her with undisguised admiration. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "It's called Phoenix," she replied. "I've been composing it since the fire. It's not finished yet." "Like us," Marcus murmured, then caught himself. "I mean, like your recovery." But something in his expression told Valerie he'd meant exactly what he'd said first. As they continued their walk, their hands brushed, then linked, a small, significant bridge between the people they had been before the fire and whoever they were becoming after it. Phoenix Project. "The problem is that half the historic buildings in Westwood have outdated electrical systems," Marcus explained, pointing to diagrams spread across Valerie's kitchen table. "Most were built before modern fire codes, with minimal updates since." Valerie nodded, making notes on her laptop. It had been 2 months since the Bellamy fire, and what had begun as casual conversation about preventing similar tragedies had evolved into something more ambitious: the Phoenix Project, a community initiative to improve fire safety in Westwood's historic district. "Professor Jimenez from the engineering department is willing to lead safety inspections," Valerie said, "and I've secured preliminary approval for student volunteers from the university's public service program." Their partnership had proven unexpectedly effective. Valerie's connections at the university and her talent for organization complemented Marcus's practical knowledge and relationships within emergency services. Together, they'd assembled an impressive coalition of supporters. "The city council meeting is next Tuesday," Marcus reminded her. "We'll need to make a compelling case. We will." Valerie's confidence had returned in recent weeks. Teaching had resumed, and she'd even performed at a small faculty recital. "These buildings are worth saving," but not at the cost of lives. What remained unspoken was how their professional collaboration had intensified their personal connection. They worked seamlessly together, anticipating each other's thoughts, building on ideas. More than once, Valerie had caught herself watching Marcus as he patiently explained fire safety concepts to building owners or sketched modification plans. His passion for protecting others ran deep. The night before their presentation to the city council, Valerie was reviewing their proposal when a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Marcus holding takeout containers. "Thought you might forget to eat," he said with a knowing smile. They ate on her balcony, the late November air crisp but not uncomfortable. Valerie's new apartment was smaller than her place at the Bellamy, but modern with effective sprinklers and accessible exits that Marcus had approved of immediately. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. Valerie considered the question. "Not like I used to be. After surviving a fire, public speaking seems less terrifying." Marcus laughed, then grew serious. "You know, when I found you that night, I thought we might be too late." "But you weren't," Valerie said softly, reaching for his hand across the table. The touch was familiar now, yet still sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with temperature. "The thing is," Marcus continued, his voice low, "I keep thinking about how many things had to go right for us to be sitting here now. If I'd been assigned to a different entry point, if you'd been unconscious already, if the building had collapsed minutes earlier, if you hadn't saved my violin," Valerie added with a small smile. "That too," he agreed. "And now we're trying to make sure others don't face the same danger, and it feels right," Valerie finished for him. "It feels right?" Their eyes met, and something shifted. The careful boundary between colleagues and something more dissolving in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Marcus leaned forward, hesitating just enough to give her time to pull away. Instead, Valerie closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt both inevitable and surprising. His hand came up to cradle her face with the same gentle strength he'd shown carrying her from the fire. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Valerie saw her own wonder, reflected in Marcus's eyes. "I've wanted to do that since the hospital," he admitted. "I've wanted you to," she confessed. Their presentation to the city council the next day was a triumph, funding approved, permits expedited. But it was the quiet moment afterward, walking hand in hand through downtown Westwood, that felt like the real victory. They talked about everything and nothing. Future plans for the Phoenix project, a weekend trip to meet Marcus's family. The piece Valerie was still composing. "I think I know how it ends now," she told him, squeezing his hand. "The piece or the project?" "Both," she said. "And neither. Some things don't need definitive endings." Marcus smiled, understanding perfectly. "Just new beginnings." Symphony of Second Chances, the Westwood Community Theater buzzed with anticipation. The benefit concert for fire victims and the Phoenix Project had sold out within days. Backstage, Valerie adjusted her emerald gown, fingers trembling slightly as she tuned her violin one final time. 6 months had passed since the Bellamy fire. In that time, the Phoenix Project had helped upgrade safety systems in 7 historic buildings, with plans for dozens more. What had begun as a small initiative had grown into a model program with inquiries coming from neighboring communities. "Nervous?" a familiar voice asked. Marcus appeared in the doorway of her dressing room, handsome in a charcoal suit. "Oddly, no," Valerie realized, setting down her violin. "For the first time in forever, I'm excited rather than terrified." Marcus crossed the room, taking her hands in his. "You've come a long way from that hospital room." "We both have." She leaned up to kiss him briefly. "I never thought nearly dying would lead to all this. The project, my music, us." Their relationship had deepened steadily over the months. Marcus had become her confidant, her partner in all things. They'd navigated the complicated logistics of the Phoenix Project together, supported each other through setbacks, celebrated victories both personal and professional. A stagehand appeared at the door. "5 minutes, Miss Foster." Alone again, Marcus reached into his pocket. "I have something for you." "A good luck charm?" He placed a small wooden box in her palm. Inside lay a delicate pendant, a phoenix crafted in silver and copper, rising from stylized flames. "Marcus, it's beautiful. I had it made from salvaged copper wiring from the Bellamy," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Something beautiful from the ashes." Valerie touched the pendant, emotion tightening her throat. "Perfect for tonight," the stage manager appeared. "It's time, Miss Foster." Marcus kissed her once more. "I'll be in the front row." Stepping onto the stage, Valerie felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, but none of the paralyzing fear that had once defined her relationship with performance. The audience applauded as she took her position at center stage. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady. "6 months ago, fire destroyed the Bellamy building. Many of us lost homes, possessions, security, but what emerged from that tragedy was a community determined to protect its heritage without risking its people." Her gaze found Marcus in the front row. "Tonight's performance is dedicated to everyone who helped rebuild, especially the first responders who risked everything to save strangers." Lifting her violin, Valerie began to play the piece she'd been composing since the hospital. Phoenix. The melody started with soft, uncertain notes that evoked fear and loss, gradually building in complexity and courage. The central section incorporated actual fire alarms, transformed into haunting counterpoint against her violin. But the final movement was entirely new, triumphant and hopeful, with intricate passages that demanded technical brilliance and emotional authenticity. As she played the final notes, Valerie realized she was crying, tears streaming freely down her face, even as her bow hand remained perfectly steady. The theater erupted in thunderous applause. Valerie bowed, then gestured to the side stage where the Phoenix Project volunteers waited. "These are the real heroes," she said, inviting them forward. Marcus hung back until Valerie beckoned specifically to him. When he joined her at center stage, Valerie did something unplanned. She handed him her bow and whispered, "This is your victory, too." The reception afterward was jubilant. The concert had raised significant funds, and several business owners had pledged additional support. As Valerie circulated among donors and supporters, she found herself repeatedly glancing toward Marcus, who was deep in conversation with the fire chief. Later that night, they walked along the riverfront where they'd had their first real date. Stars glittered above, reflected in the dark water. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," Marcus said, stopping at a bench overlooking the water. "The university offered me an adjunct position teaching fire safety engineering starting next semester." "That's wonderful," Valerie exclaimed. "You'll be amazing." "It means I'll be leaving active duty with the department," he continued. "Fewer night shifts, more regular hours." Valerie studied him. "Are you okay with that?" "More than okay," he assured her. "Which brings me to my question." From his pocket, he produced another small box. "I realized something during your performance tonight. The most beautiful things really do rise from ashes, but only if you're brave enough to nurture them." Valerie's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Valerie Foster, you walked through fire and emerged stronger. We built something meaningful together from tragedy. I want to keep building, keep growing, keep facing whatever comes next, together." Under a sky full of stars, beside the river that had witnessed their first tentative steps toward each other, Valerie gave Marcus her answer, not just with words, but with a kiss that promised all the second chances, new beginnings, and shared courage their future would hold. The final notes of her Phoenix Symphony might have been played, but their story, like the community they'd helped rebuild, was just beginning its most beautiful movement.